Within the framework of its global fan event, Netflix has presented new advances on the third installment of The Bridgertons and also on the prequel miniseries that expands the universe of London high society. In this video, I've got news for you about the Bridgerton spinoff focused on Queen Charlotte. Make sure you stick with me to the end so you don't miss any part of the gist. Without any further delay, let's get into it. First, a preview of the third season and first look at the prequel about Queen Charlotte. Without a doubt, the Bridgertons have established themselves as one of the most important series on Netflix, and it is on that note, after the success of its first season, that they finished the second season. If there is something we can expect from the third season of the Bridgertons, it is that, once again, London's high society steals our hearts and keeps us on edge with an exciting love story. Nicola Coughlan has been in charge of exclusively revealing how the first chapter begins, and she does so by reading the first publication of Lady Whistledown, the Woman of Whispers. Dear reader, we've been apart for a long time. London's ton is finally back, and so is this author. This season, the question on everyone's mind is, of course, which newcomer will shine the brightest? This year seems to be dazzling. Unfortunately, not all young women will be able to attract attention. Let's quickly talk a little about the third season of The Bridgertons. In this new season, the Bridgertons will be complete, but a new face will appear among them. This will be actress Hannah Dodd, who will play Francesca Bridgerton, previously brought to the screen by Ruby Stokes. Also, as we all know, the order of the books will not be followed, and the new season will dance around the love story of Penelope Featherington and Colin Bridgerton. The big unknown of the season is what will happen to Pen now that Eloise, her best friend, knows her best-kept secret. Will she keep whispering? Well, we'll find out with time. Now, let's have a first look at Queen Charlotte, the prequel to the Bridgertons. Shonda Rhimes has already expressed her desire to adapt the Julia Quinn saga not only to the Bridgerton brothers, but also to other people, and the first will be Queen Charlotte. Thus, it was announced that Netflix would premiere a new series in 2023 based on the universe of our favorite London family. Under the title Queen Charlotte, Netflix has recently released the first image and the official synopsis of the series, which will feature actress India Amarteifio playing a younger version of the monarch. The title shows what the real focus of the prelude will be and keeps the name of the hit series so as not to confuse the public. Focusing on Queen Charlotte's rise to prominence and power, we'll learn more about the Queen's marriage to King George, which changed the society in which the story is set, and how the monarch came to power. The Bridgerton prequel hasn't exactly been kept a secret, but still, it's exciting to see the first footage from the spin-off, which goes back a few decades to show off the Queen Charlotte we all know from Bridgerton and how she came to power. Here, the focus is on Charlotte trying to see the king, who she is convinced is a monster. Otherwise, why would they be hiding it from her? As he joked around and dodged the teenager who watched her try to climb the fence, he became painfully obvious to us exactly who he was. Other characters that we will see in their young versions will be Princess Augusta, Lady Danbury, and Lady Violet Bridgerton. Now, let's quickly talk about the first image of India Amarteifio as the Queen, as revealed by Netflix. The first official image of Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, shows India Amarteifio characterized as the main protagonist of the series. In the photo released by Netflix, we saw the star of the plot in a white dress with a gray cape full of glitter and wearing a tiara decorated with silver flowers in her hair. With a slightly terrified look on her face and her hands joined, Queen Charlotte finds herself inside a palace. Beyond Bridgerton, everything gives off a similar vibe to Hulu's The Great, though perhaps not as unfair or skeptical. However, it still sets up a classic luscious concurrence in mistake identities and out-of-reach expectations. In other news, the comedy that dethroned Friends is not The Big Bang Theory and can be seen on Netflix. Friends is one of the most successful sitcoms of the last decades with millions of fans around the world, and The Big Bang Theory has been highly praised throughout its 12 seasons. However, there is another sitcom that topped them in viewership and is still on Netflix. Friends aired on the NBC broadcast network and ran for 10 seasons, hitting fans' screens until it concluded in 2004 with an impressive rating. This really was not something strange, since the series managed to captivate the attention of millions of viewers around the world. The hit series featured the story of a group of friends living in New York City. The group includes Monica Geller, Chandler Bing, Phoebe Buffay, and Joey Tribbiani, who were later joined by Ross Geller and Rachel Green. The story began in the iconic cafe called Central Park. The comedy was basically focused on the great journey of navigating between friendship, good and bad times, as well as triumphs, love, the past, and the future. Without a doubt, its 10 seasons were a total and resounding success that kept millions of fans hooked on their screens. The final episode of Friends aired on May 6, 2004. 2004, earning a viewership of 52.5 million viewers. However, before Friends reached its emotional conclusion in 2004, there was another sitcom whose finale outscored the Central Park Pal series. This program premiered in July 1989 and ended on May 14, 1998, when Friends had barely half of its career on the air. The show we are talking about is Seinfeld, the sitcom that ran for 9 seasons on NBC and that brought together 4 friends named Jerry, Elaine, George, and Kramer, played by Jerry Seinfeld, Jason Alexander, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Michael Richards in all its installments. Seinfeld was tasked with exploring Jerry's everyday life and his relationships with George, Elaine, and Kramer. And just like the characters on Friends, they also lived in New York City and used to meet at many different low-end restaurants. It is said that the day the final episode of Seinfeld was broadcast, the streets of several cities in the United States were almost empty between 8 and 10 at night because fans were glued to their screens saying goodbye to the comedy that made them laugh for almost a decade. It was the most watched episode in television history, ahead of the Friends finale with 76 million viewers. Let's talk about the fantasy series that wants to dethrone Amazon's Rings of Power. With Amazon Prime Video having The Lord of the Rings of Power prequel, Netflix having The Witcher, and HBO having House of the Dragon, it was only a matter of time before Disney Plus entered the streaming competition. With its fantasy revival series of the 80s classic, Disney Plus wants to compete in the genre that is giving Netflix, Amazon, and HBO so much success. Ron Howard's Willow was a brazen attempt by George Lucas to make his own Lord of the Rings by applying his filter to the fantasy adventure genre. Now, after more than 30 years, Willow's story will finally continue in its own series, with Warwick Davis returning as a mentor to a new young hero named Kit, a princess on a quest to protect her world. When it was released in theaters in 1988 and before Willow ended up being owned by Disney, it grossed over $137 million at the box office. It wasn't as great of a showing for a potential box office hit as many predicted at the time, but the film garnered rave reviews, making it a cult classic for the ages while prompting George Lucas and Ron Howard to consider making a sequel of some sort at a later date. Set long after the original film, the Disney Plus series will feature cast members like Warwick Davis and Joanne Whalley. This makes some wonder how it will fit in with regards to the canon of the books. After the release of the film, Willow's story continued in the pages of 3 novels. Said books were worked on not only by George Lucas, but also by the acclaimed X-Men comics writer Chris Claremont. However, the books had several divergences from the movie, so it's questionable how much the TV sequel will end up getting out of them. Willow has a cult fan base for a reason, and unlike other fantasy movies of the 1980s, the film doesn't try to be too subversive or particularly serious. Although the new series seems a little darker, there is also a good dose of humor in this new trailer. Hopefully, the series will be able to capture the same tone and launch a new generation of fans. That concludes today's video. If you found the video helpful, please do consider giving us a thumbs up, and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. See you next time!